Yeah, okay. Hey, welcome back, everyone. And I guess today we're talking about anamorphic lenses, generally lenses, cinema lenses, the difference between both, and all of that stuff. Today's episode, I think, 23. So we shot yesterday episode 22, and today is episode 23. And yeah, we have some thoughts on anamorphic lenses and the difference between them and normal cinema lenses, and hopefully today we're gonna be sharing that with you. So yeah, first of all, how are you doing, Kai? How is work going?
Oh yeah, we talked yesterday, so I'm sure there's not a lot of update going on.
Yeah, I guess so. Same for me as well. Not a lot of stuff happening. Same. And yeah, so okay, so for those of you who don't know, like generally the difference between anamorphic and cinema, not that we're like experts on the topic, but we're just sharing our thoughts. But basically, like anamorphic lenses are those like kind of lenses that have like a kind of oval shape, like oval coating, right?
Mhm.
And they produce these kind of oval as well bokeh, right?
Yeah.
And they usually, the way they work is that they usually shoot in like kind of square format, in a squeezed way, and then you de-squeeze in post, so that you have this kind of wide aspect ratio, usually 2.35 by 1, or kind of around that. You could even reach 2.8 depending on the focal range of the lens and depending on what kind of lens are you using. And initially, like at the beginning, they were mostly like these anamorphic lenses are quite expensive, right? And so in the past, like the average consumer wouldn't be able to afford a normal anamorphic lens. But nowadays, companies have come up and created some kind of anamorphic lenses for mirrorless and DSLR cameras that you can use for E-mount and EF mount and all of that stuff. But yeah, generally that's about anamorphic. Unlike the cinema lenses, which have a more of a circular bokeh, they produce a circular bokeh. And the lens itself is more like the you know, the glass of the lens is more spherical. It comes more of a circle, and that's why it produces.
I heard for anamorphic lens, it's just like the most front glass that is oval, but the rest of the glass, which they call element, is actually also like spherical, like normal. Only the most front one, as far as I know. Yeah, like the most front one for anamorphic.
Because when you look at the anamorphic lens, like from the front, it looks like a, you know, kind of like an egg shape. Not an egg shape, but like
even more, like more
stretched.
shaped.
Yeah.
And the complexity of an anamorphic lens, like what's going on inside, is extremely complicated. Because as far as I know, each time they add one more glass, it just gets much more complicated. Like the purpose of one glass is like maybe they try to kill a certain type of color. Maybe they want less blue. I'm just saying from what I remember. Like I'm not an expert on that, but from what I know, it's like each time people ask why they put so much glass is because they need to adjust the light. They need to bounce the light in a certain way so it doesn't look weird. You know, sometimes you get this split light, like you see this purple blue thing in the bokeh. Like if they try to remove that, they try to put more glass in it. And for anamorphic, that's the case. Like it's extremely complicated. That's why it's much more expensive. Same goes to cinema lens actually, but obviously depends on what kind of style you want. You choose. And I think one very significant characteristic of an anamorphic lens is the lens flare. As anyone trying to imitate it, right?
You can't talk about anamorphic and ignore the lens flares that they produce. And actually, I think one of the reasons they're expensive is because of the bounce that you mentioned. Because they're designed in a way like to control the light, so it keeps bouncing, I think, like in some way until it reaches the sensor. And that's why they're expensive, because they're kind of like playing with the light itself, right? There's that as well. And people usually like anamorphic because of the character. So I feel like people have reached a point in cinematography where they have kind of like reached the tipping point of like these perfect cinema lenses, and then they decided now to like we talked about yesterday, like having character, right? This is one of the things, like film grain has character, and anamorphic lenses also have character, and that's why people choose them over normal lenses. And so they kind of have their own anamorphic look, you know. And it kind of goes back to the idea of like drifting away from this like perfect and all of that like perfection that comes along with these like very well made you know, cinema lenses, right? And so this is why people use them along with the lens flare. I actually think like the lens flare produces a very nice it creates depth, because like the lens flare the anamorphic lenses produce usually comes in front of the subject. So let's say you have a person walking by, right? So the light is behind him and the flare comes in front of him. And I think that's like, it creates kind of depth, right? In the frame. So you have foreground elements and then the person in the middle and then the light in the back, right? And that's why also partly why they are quite nice. But I'm more interested in anamorphic lenses that are consumer based than the anamorphic lenses that are cinematic.
Because that's the one that we can afford.
yes. Because I feel like it's more relatable to me.
Yeah,
right?
it's
As
closer to you.
And it's something.
It's closer to us.
Yeah. And it's something being developed over and over, and it's becoming more accessible for the average person, right? So you have brands like Siri. I'm not sure if I. Siri, yeah. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right, but they recently produced, you know, they keep on producing like these anamorphic lenses affordable. And I've actually, I want to like know about your like opinion on that. Like, what do you think about these like anamorphic lenses in comparison to the cinema lenses? I don't know if you like, how familiar are you with them, seeing the test footage, right?
Are you talking about the cheap anamorphic lens, or are you talking about the expensive one?
The affordable ones.
Versus like the difference expensive cinematic lens?
Yes.
Well, I think one thing about anamorphic lens is like the expensive ones is that it already has relatively less focal length compared to the cinematic lens.
Okay.
Like anamorphic lens, I know that they don't have a lot of focal length, but for Siri, I know that they have like a 50 and like a 30. And I think they came up with quite some, and they kind of like are targeting. I mean that's the whole point of the lens. Actually, they want people who use mirrorless camera to be able to use their anamorphic lens, right? And the thing is, I don't see a lot of people using like I'd say a bit. People who are a bit lower than indie filmmakers, not even indie filmmakers, like some people who just take nice photos on Instagram, but they're not like professional photographers. I don't see them using like cinema lens on a mirrorless camera body. You see that in like some filmmakers, indie filmmakers, they do that, but for like consumers, real consumers, they don't actually use cinema lens. And I feel like this anamorphic lens, I do see some consumers that actually buy it. I saw some people who are not like professional filmmaker, but they bought it just to get that look, just to have fun with it, and just to shoot something fun because it's so cheap. It's even cheaper than a lot of normal like photography lens. You know, it's like $500 as far as I know, right? Do you know the price of it?
Yeah, I think it's around 1,000 or 500, depending on like the focal, like the f-stop, and they have a couple of lenses, right? So it's within that range, I would say.
But I feel like the point of that lens is really interesting because you know, I know that some directors, they shoot in normal cinema lens, spherical lens, and then they crop it, they add the black bars, you know, as all filmmaking students do. They add, and that director, I forgot his name, I'm gonna look it up later, but he does that, right? And so if Siri, I saw some review on the quality of Siri lens is like not bad, but is that what you're really looking for? Like what are you trying to get? If anyone who's trying to buy that, do you just want the lens flare? Is it worth the money to get just the lens flare? Can you just do it in post? Like anything about this lens? Like I'm just curious about what people think about. What do you think about it? Would you want to get it if you have the money?
So I honestly, I wouldn't want to get it. Why? Because anamorphic is all about character, right?
Mm-hmm.
And these lenses don't, from what I've seen, like the footage that I've seen, is they don't quite give you that character,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so to me, if I want to go anamorphic, I would go full on anamorphic. I wouldn't try to be, because it looks like you're trying too hard to get that anamorphic look, but you're not quite there yet. You know, like it gives you the anamorphic look, it gives you the flare sometimes, but it's not quite there yet, you know? And so I wouldn't necessarily buy these lenses because I want that character. I want the proper, true character of the anamorphic, right? And I just don't feel like they are there yet to give us that proper character.
But do you think they will ever be there though?
I think that's a very, like, technically speaking, it's a very good it's a very good progress, right? And I think they will be there at a certain time, right? Because people want the anamorphic, and so companies are going to work to produce that, you know? And actually, so one of the things that I've recently discovered and I've been geeking about is how do you produce a anamorphic look, like proper anamorphic look, through on a budget, right? With the price of these lenses. And one of the things that you can do that, I've seen some people actually do that, is that you need to buy these old projection lenses. So like in the past, so if you look at in the past, projectors used to have a kind of lenses that have kind of anamorphic look, right?
Oh really? I didn't know that.
And I think they're called they're called ISCO ultrascope or something like that. And you can buy those projectors. They kind of like they come like the kind of like golden lenses. They look golden from the outside.
Wait, Ibrahim,
they're made out
projector?
Out of matter.
You mean by those the projector that people used to do presentation, or?
I think so. Yeah. So not necessarily for presentations, but more in theaters.
Okay.
So back in the day, the theaters usually have lenses, right? And these lenses, they will project on them the movies, right? And so some of them had an anamorphic like lenses, right? Like the lens of the projector is anamorphic. And so people have been able to take that, right? And attach that to a taking lens. A taking lens is a normal lens, right? And when you attach these both through a clamp, right? So you put a clamp in the middle and you attach both, and then you get a proper anamorphic look, right? And the results that people have been able to get from that is absolutely amazing. And in fact, like one of the people,
I never heard of that.
It's a crazy thing, dude. It's a crazy thing, dude. And in fact, one of the people that have been able to like really do that is what's his name, Ash Thorpe, right?
Oh no!
For those of you know, the designer Ash Thorpe.
Did that.
Yeah. Not only him, of course, a lot of other people have done that. But Ash Thorpe is the person that I've actually learned from him that you can actually do that, right? I was listening to one of his podcasts and he was talking about this, and it's crazy. I was like, how can you freaking do that? And and surprisingly, you can do that. And these like all you need is a clamp, and all you need is a projector or this anamorphic lens, right? Anamorphic projector, right? The ultrascope, ISCO ultrascope or something like that it's called. And you can have like 2 times anamorphic. Like it just, the footage looks amazing. So like the only downside with it is the workflow. The workflow is a bit difficult because you have to kind of like match it up perfectly, and there's a certain way to focus, and you can't necessarily zoom, you know. But eventually, like you can get the look. Like if you really want to,
I have a question. It's like, is the footage squeezed when you're shooting it, or is it like directly the way that an anamorphic should look like on camera if you put it on correctly?
I think it's directly squeezed, right? Because
you mean squeezed or unsqueezed?
I think it's directly squeezed. I think
it's squeezed.
I'm not quite sure, but I think so, because you're basically attaching an external lens onto your taking lens, right? Onto your normal lens. And so it's not quite programmed, right? But what you can do is that you can buy them. I think it's squeezed already.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And the results that I've seen from that is like absolutely amazing, you know?
Where should I look it up?
You can buy... so you can look it up on YouTube, right? Just type ultrascope or ultra ISCO adapters, you know, anamorphic adapters. anamorphic projection lenses, and you can find people who have done some test footage and people who have actually done some tutorials on how to attach these anamorphic lenses into your taking lenses. And so and also there are limits to it. So for instance, in order not to get vignetting, you need to have lenses with 50 mm focal length or more, right? So if you have wide lenses, then you would get this black vignette on the corners. And so that is one of the ways. But it's just, to me, this is something revolutionary, that you can actually do that. Like, I was like, that is crazy, dude.
But
the results are amazing.
Can you get that thing anywhere though? Can you just find it on eBay or Amazon?
Yeah, exactly. So you cannot buy them new. There are specific websites that sell them in Germany or like in Europe, and even in the US and California. And also you can get them on eBay, right? So you get a clean ISCO adapters, and you can just attach them to your lenses, and it's amazing. And like the best results you would get out of cropped sensors, because cropped sensors usually give you a like a longer focal length, right? And so you could avoid the vignetting, right?
I mean, you can just crop in post though if you really want to.
Yeah. And it's just crazy. It's way better than these lenses that have been manufactured by the Siri. Is it called Siri?
Siri. Yeah,
it's way better than.
But the thing is, I feel like because of its limitation, as you said, like you cannot really focus, and I feel like there's certain technical limitation that makes it not consumer friendly. So I feel like it's kind of like a thing that, some people, they like to take a certain type of glass and they just put in front of their lens and they create certain effect. It is more towards that style, I feel like. But there's one thing about anamorphic lenses that, as far as I know, is that the closer you are to the center of the image, the sharper it is. And anamorphic lens essentially is pretty, it's not sharp. Compared to cinema lens, anamorphic lens is way less sharper than cinema lens. But that's what I like about it, because it although it's not sharp, it has a really good texture. And as far as I know, the more you are at the edge of the image, the more it has this texture and this blur. That's why you see in this film that are shot in anamorphic lens, whenever they go close up, you see this I think it's called layoff or something. It's just become blurry at the edge of the image, and it even have some distortion most of the times. But I just like that. That's, as you said, that's just like a good character.
It's quite nice. Yeah. It's also quite nice because it gives you a painting feeling, right? Some people describe it as the feeling of a painting, because when you look at a image from an anamorphic lens, it looks like a painting. It has a lot of texture, and also the image comes like warped. If you look at whenever you're watching a movie, how do you know it's shot on anamorphic? One of the thing, like the easy tells, is that you look at the the straight lines, and they're usually warped at the edge, and that also gives it the character, the beautiful. Yeah. It's that gives it quite the character as well, and
man. The thing is, I feel like the people who do you wonder audience notice that they're watching something, like people who don't care about filmmaking? Do you think they actually notice that there's something going on if you switch a footage between like a cinema lens versus a anamorphic lens? Do people actually feel it?
I don't know. I think I don't know actually. Would they? Because when I was before I learned about filmmaking, when I was watching movies, I wouldn't quite notice. Like I had watched movies shot on anamorphic, and I didn't know the difference between anamorphic and a normal lens.
But why would these laymen? I see some people who don't know about filmmaking, but they're trying to shoot something that looks cinematic. They just add the black bars top and bottom. What came in their mind and thinking that if they do that, it looks cinematic? Like people who don't know about filmmaking, they do that. Is it because they're aware of anamorphic? I don't know. That's kind of interesting.
Maybe because they've seen the anamorphic look, and I've heard that actually Roger Deakins does that. So he shoots his film on a normal cinema lenses, and he crops. He doesn't add black bars, but he just crops.
That's what I was saying. I was talking about him earlier. Yeah, he shoot in a spherical lens.
It's crazy, yeah. Why does he do that?
Maybe he graduated from film school. That's
Yeah.
but I want to quickly talk about what the difference between cinema lens and anamorphic lens. So as we talked about, cinema lens are much more perfect, let's say, compared to anamorphic lens. Anamorphic lens has way too many characteristics compared to a cinematic lens. Let's put it that way. Not that it's bad, but you really need to have a strong taste to know which anamorphic lens you like and to use the one that you feel like is more connected to your story. So I feel like people who use anamorphic lens, they really need to have a clear idea of what they want. But as for cinema lens, obviously every cinema lens, as far as I know, they also have a variety of characteristic, and the most obvious one is the bokeh. So every cinema lens, as far as I know, they have different type of bokeh, different brands, and even same models that produced by factories, they still have different type of bokeh, and you still get to choose the character that you want. But compared to anamorphic, it's just much more clear, and that's why digital filmmakers who like these clear, sharp image, they tend to choose cinema lens rather than anamorphic lens.
Yeah.
What do you think about cinema lens?
I think it's totally subjective. Yeah, and it totally depends on like what do you personally like, right? Like for instance, if you have a client that actually like when you get a gig that gives you total creative freedom, that's when most of the cinematographers use anamorphic, right? Because they're like, like screw it, let's just like play around with it. And but most of the times actually the clients usually prefer a certain look, the normal look, and so like you would have no other choice but to shoot on a normal cinema lens, right? And so it's totally up to you, if you want the character, if you want the anamorphic look, and I feel like the anamorphic look is something very geeky that only is understood among filmmakers, right? Like I don't think the average person would definitely say, oh, like look at this beautiful oval bokeh, I think it's just something within us filmmakers and people in that industry that actually geek about this stuff.
But that's actually something that I thought about. Earlier I asked you the question if you think people notice that there's a anamorphic or like a oval bokeh going on, right? And I feel like the thing about filmmaking is like you don't overdo anything in an image most of the time. Okay, some directors they have other choice, but most of the time we don't want to overdo anything, right? But when you combine a bunch of details, it shows your character. It's like oval bokeh is one thing, but maybe if you want to really show that your character, like this cinematography is about your personality, your style, it's not just about the anamorphic lens, but maybe about the character's outfit, about the color grading, about the film stock that you use for shooting. All of these small detail builds up and make a very specific style that you see as a result in the image. It's not just about one lens, because anyone can use that lens, right?
Yes.
At the end of the day, you still have to make a lot of small choices to get that big result. So I feel like maybe people see that big result because of all of these small detail. If one thing is missing, maybe the feeling of that specific scene will just go a whole nother way. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, totally, man. I agree. It's everything. Like, it's not just the anamorphic. It's there are so many ways that you can define your style and give character to your film, right? It's not just anamorphia. It's a lot of things that come together, like the film stock, the art direction, like all of this stuff, And I think anamorphic is just extra thing to give character, to your footage, right?
Oh, but there's one thing that I one last thing, okay, before we end this episode, I feel like we're finishing soon. Is I heard that when using anamorphic lens, it really adds up the budget because you see too many things. So even if you're shooting a close up, like you see everything in the background. It's too wide. So the art production team, they have to set up everything, even in the surrounding, although it's like an extreme close up. That's something that I haven't thought of. That's actually a problem.
Yeah.
If they want to shoot a wide angle, it's like super wide angle compared to a cinema lens. That apparently that's the thing.
Yeah.